Hi everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of the Behold podcast on the Genre Equality channel. I'm Hitzer,
I'm Isa.
and this week we'll be talking about our favorite Chinese language films. In fact, we'll be talking about it because it's a sort of Chinese New Year, Lunar New Year special episode that we have going on here. It's been a week since Chinese New Year, of course, but it being a 2 week celebration, we figured why not jump into our favorite Chinese films, considering
Hmm.
it is 1/3 of the world's population.
Yeah.
Some of the biggest blockbusters in the world are not from Hollywood. In fact, they're actually from China.
Hmm.
But the movies we're going to be talking about are not what we would say blockbusters.
Uh,
Well, with the exception of
well,
one, with the exception
with
of
the exception
one,
of one, it became a blockbuster.
yeah,
But I don't know if you could consider it a blockbuster. It was the first of its kind, more or less.
pretty
Um,
much, yeah. So we'll begin with Wong Kar Wai's magnum opus, shall we say? One of his most beloved films called In the Mood for Love,
Yep.
a ravishingly moody introduction to Wong Kar Wai's very sensual, very visual style, of course, which has since been not say sequel, they're thematic sequels in Chungking Express and 2046,
Yeah.
But In the Mood for Love was, I think, his big breakout, especially outside of Hong Kong.
Hmm.
Subsequently, we'll be talking about the groundbreaking wuxia epic, Ang Lee's Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon,
Yep.
which is not, of course, not the first wuxia ever seen, but it why I say is groundbreaking was because it was the Western audiences
Yeah.
first introduction to wuxia.
Hmm.
The wire stunts and the flying and all that. A lot of people had their minds blown. And me being 13, 14 at the time was also my first introduction to wuxia, which is what
Hmm.
helped me get into older Chinese wuxia lah. But it being the groundbreaking film that it is, we thought we'll talk about Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Yep.
Finally, we'll be talking about Lulu Wang's very bittersweet, bicultural tale of family and morality and secrecy called The
Mm.
Farewell. It gained a lot of Oscar buzz for Lulu Wang, who unfortunately was not nominated in the end,
Yeah.
and neither was Aquafina. It's quite a snub, because it was such a great little indie film,
Hmm.
and it affected me quite a bit. This happened in 2019. Yeah. So we'll begin with the 2000s films. First one is In the Mood for Love by Wong Kar Wai. This is our main topic, so we'll be delving deep into it. So if you don't spoilers for any of this, right? Please don't listen yet.
Yeah.
Go watch the films first, or
Yeah.
just listen to the parts that of the podcast that you've already seen. Like, if you've already seen In the Mood for Love, then listen to In the Mood for Love.
Yeah.
Yeah, but let's begin with In the Mood for Love, Wong Kar Wai's opus. When did you first watch it? Do you watch it in cinemas or anything?
Ah.
And what were your first impressions of it?
Okay. I definitely didn't watch it in cinemas, right? Because in
Mm-hmm.
2000, let me see, 2000, I was still pretty young in 2000, right? Like it was 13. It's not exactly something you're going to go to the cinema to watch unless
Mm.
you've got an adult accompanying you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, not that there's anything, that a 13-year-old couldn't watch necessarily, but I just don't think at that point in my life I was that drawn to cinema of that ilk. So I'm gonna say it was
Mm.
probably a couple of years later. Only when I started really
Video
kind of
Easy or
like
something.
getting. Yeah, exactly, exactly. I think it
Yeah.
was. Oof. I think I saw Chungking Express first before I really got into Wong Kar Wai.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, obviously, if you're gonna trace everything, you're gonna hit In the Mood for Love at some point in time.
Yep.
But it was life changing. I think, nonetheless, for to be introduced to cinema of that kind. Just how
Yeah.
beautiful it was, its use of music, its thematic kind of like discussion of unrequited love and all of that. I think it impacted a very young kind of teenage me. Uh, I'm not sure if it's in a necessarily in a good way or but just to be exposed to that, and what essentially was my first look into very artistic non-western cinema,
Mm.
was very, very crucial, I think, in my watching habits to come.
Yeah. Of course, you're Chinese, right, and I'm Malay. Was this
Yeah.
like I mean, I don't assume that this was your first Chinese film.
No, it wasn't. And I think what's more interesting is that most of it is in Cantonese, right? And I'm
Yes.
Cantonese. My whole family speaks Cantonese, and a lot of the films that I watched when I was a lot younger,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe I'll talk a bit about more of that when we go into Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Had well, it was recorded in Cantonese, right? I watched a lot of like Hong Kong cinema with my family when I was younger. Like a lot of the time when we went to the cinema when we
Mm-hmm.
were still living in Malaysia, everything was dubbed to Cantonese or recorded in Cantonese or filmed in Cantonese.
Wow.
So to kind of like revisit that, right, to watch the film in Cantonese is always kind of like a nostalgia trip for me, right?
Mm.
Just because like there is something very different about the dialect from listening to it in Mandarin, right? In fact, I've actually watched the Mandarin dub of In the Mood for Love, and I can't like
Yeah.
it just doesn't quite hit the right spot for me because there are certain tones and certain inflections, that I mean, it's a dub versus something, right? Like it's recorded in Cantonese,
Mm.
both Maggie Cheung and Tony Leong, of course, are native Cantonese speakers as well.
Yep.
So that definitely kind of adds to the expression of it. It adds to this very quaint kind of um, quaint audio auditory kind of feeling that you don't quite get in the version that's dubbed into Mandarin.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. If you all are not familiar, lah, like Wong Kar Wai's In the Mood for Love is, I think, popularly considered one of his best films.
Mm.
Some may say it's Chongqing, some may say it's 2046. I'm not going to argue with you, lah. But In the Mood for Love is certainly one of his best. Like, it kind of details the emotional subtleties and private revelations of the connection between a secretary named Su Li Zhen, played
Yeah.
by Maggie Cheung, of course, and journalist Chow Mo Wan, played by Tony Leong. The year is 1962, set in Hong Kong. So
Mhm.
they move into the same building, and after growing closer, the two realize that their respective spouses are being unfaithful. Um, and it's kind of a source of shared vulnerability for
Yeah.
them that deepens their friendships and challenges the boundaries of their emotional impulses. So in order to better understand their spouses, right? Liz Jen and Mo Wan, they try to reenact moments of their relationship that could have led to infidelity. They're essentially trying to put themselves in the shoes of their cheating spouses through each other.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, So, not your traditional love story by any means.
Mm.
So, though both protagonists kind of they use the staged interactions as a means of spending time together, but neither admits that they are developing romantic feelings for one another.
Mhm.
And Wong kind of affirms his mastery of what I would call like cinematic restraint,
Mm.
with just by letting it play out through stunning visuals that reflect the quiet tension of the protagonist's relationship.
Yeah.
And the most poetic sequences are characterized by I guess what we'll call absence and sparsity.
Mm.
He uses the sparsity as a means of promoting suspense, of accentuating emotionality, and subverting traditional Western romantic expectations.
Yeah.
So the two protagonists' connection often manifests in glimpses of furtive smiles or brushed shoulders of distance instead of closeness.
Yeah.
So like it has this alluring power that lies in its subversion, like the audience's inability to distinguish between what is real, what is staged, and what is taking place in their imaginations.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like,
Yeah.
I think the use of we don't see their spouses, right? At any given point in time. Or
No,
well, and
yeah.
we don't see the spouses' faces at very least at
Yeah.
any given point in time, and just like it furtively helps us. It helps to isolate the two characters that we're focused on, right, and
Hmm.
their particular relationship, amongst kind of like the bustle of their neighbors and all that. The living arrangement is kind of odd, I think, in terms of like our modern understanding of what it should be, right?
Mm.
Like there's a common area in the apartment building that they're living in,
Mm.
and of course it's very neighborly. There's a lot of kind of interaction going on with the neighbors as well, which allows them to have those like important first interactions
Mm.
that eventually developed into that, and that's something that I think didn't strike me as much until my most recent rewatch.
Yeah.
You know, and of course, you know, right now, just generally being more socially isolated in
Mm,
the times we're living in, I think that's something I took a lot greater note of, the fact that their romance, so to say,
mm.
um, could only take place because it took place in a greater kind of like group interaction
Like an
before
urban
that.
kampung or something like that, right?
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
right. And that it is kind of rare, I think, these
Yep.
days. You know,
Yep.
a lot of the time, like even in Singapore, we live, you know, with so many people around us. There are plenty of neighbors that we have, but how often do we interact with our neighbors to that degree?
Yes, yes, 100%. I really, really loved how different it was the first time I saw it.
Mm.
I think when I first watched it, young, I didn't see it in cinemas either. I went to Video Easy. I got a DVD of it, a VCD of it at the time. I don't think I liked it the first time I watched it.
um
Me being young, more into like action movies and stuff like that. Haven't really gone in the middle of going through my cinephile phase, but
mm,
there is like uh, a graduality to it. You start out with like the basic bitch stuff like Tarantino and Hitchcock and
yeah.
stuff like that. I was more into plot driven stuff
Hmm.
and dialogue driven stuff. And then like this is sort of my entry into character driven nuance, which I was
Mm.
not familiar with.
Yeah.
Me now, I prefer it, to all the other stuff, lah, but
Yeah.
I only appreciated it more as I grew older, and I've rewatched this film phew, 4 or 5 times since then.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, most recently being like just a few weeks ago, lah. It's very good. It captures the loneliness, and unfulfilled desire.
Mm.
I think better than almost any other film in the 2000s.
Agreed.
And Wong's use of lush visuals, the color, the
Oh yeah.
precise
Hmm.
framing, the evocative slow motion, that soundtrack, the theme that keeps coming in. I think it illustrates both the beauty of unexpectedly falling in love, and the fractured feeling of knowing that it can never be consummated,
Yeah.
not because it's not physically it's not because it's physically impossible, but
Yeah.
because they don't want it lah. They don't
Hmm.
want to be a part of the plot of the film is that they don't want to sink to the levels of their spouses, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And
So yeah.
Maggie Chung makes a pretty impassioned kind of plea, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's not be like them. Um, you know, yeah, I mean, like, well, there's so much to say about like what's beautiful about In the Mood for Love. I
Yeah.
want to talk a bit about the use of music, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
main theme, which is used as a refrain again and again and again. And
Mm-hmm.
I do vaguely remember, I think the first time that I saw it, when I first rented the video from VCD from Video Easy, I
Mm-hmm.
got a little annoyed, right? Like, because it keeps coming back, in kind of like different scenes and different sequences. I
Mm-hmm.
think much like you, it was only later on, upon repeated watchings, that I kind of understood what he was going for,
Mm-hmm.
in that particular musical choice. The
Yeah.
music is amazing, right? And just the way that it continues to allow it to bring back a familiar refrain in order to allow the audience to kind of sink into this sense of familiarity and comfort
Mm.
while we watch what's playing on stage, just to let you know that like it's more of the same, right, of what we're seeing on screen,
Mm-hmm.
that every time the refrain plays, but at the same time, like there's something growing there, right? Each time that the refrain comes in, it becomes more meaningful and a bit more deep
Mm-hmm.
in its use.
Yeah,
um
yeah, it really allows you to bask in very quiet moments.
mm,
You see the two characters eating noodles alone,
yeah.
waiting in the rain by the alleyways, things like that. And those are some of the most heartbreaking, entrancing moments of the film. Like, the use
Yeah.
of slow motion also very unusual. Usually you see it for like action sequences, right?
Hmm.
Just the slow motion here was it lets you bask in like the gorgeous splendor of the actors who are very handsome and beautiful
Hmm.
respectively, but it also kind of ensnares them in their own private little prisons,
Yeah.
like the loneliness despite being living in that type of community, how Maggie Chung has to hide just the fact that she's writing a comic with him, right?
Yeah.
Because like the social mores of that time, were okay with men having affairs, but not with women.
Mm.
That kind of thing. And also, she doesn't want to give Tony Leung away, lah. Very good. Like the color, the use of red and blacks. Uh,
Mm.
it's very Chinese, and it also captures the suppressed identity intensity of their love, lah, and their own identities. It's so beautifully cinematographed. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's easy to see it as kind of peak Wong Kar Wai, right?
Yep.
Just in terms of the things that he's become known for,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, I mean, some people would say, Blueberry Nights was kind of like the as peak as you can get. But
The
that,
Nora Jones one, right?
yeah, but I mean,
Yeah.
like, that was Wong Kar Wai making fun of himself, more or less.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but so like in the Mood for Love, still, I think one of the standout moments in Chinese cinema.
Yeah.
Or I mean, if you want to be specific, Hong Kong cinema, and definitely a very important film to me.
Yeah.
Just given like its place in my uh, cinema experience,
Mm-hmm.
for sure. I was thinking about how on the last Behold we were talking about how In the Mood for Love would kind of like bridge, our Chinese New Year episode and the Valentine Day
Yes.
episode.
Yep.
On reviewing it, right, just between the time that we recorded last, I'm not sure if I would recommend people watch this for Valentine's Day necessarily. I
No.
mean,
Yeah.
if you're yeah, it's not exactly even Eternal Sunshine, like at least it ends on a slightly hopeful, slightly happier note.
Mm-hmm.
There's a resignation in the Mood for Love, I think, which is
Mm-hmm.
both beautiful and painful, and extremely relatable. That I'm not sure if I would necessarily consider it to be Valentine's Day material.
Yeah. Yeah. I suppose it would have fit with our like next year, like we did like anti Valentine's, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But even then, not so. It happens in the middle.
Hmm.
It's not rejecting romance. It's not embracing
Yeah,
romance. It's yeah.
there is a love story there, right? It's
Yeah.
just that that love story never sees the kind of conclusions that we want as an audience.
Yes.
Yeah.
When you were younger and you watched it, right? What was your opinion on the pacing of the film? I now love it, but I hated it back then.
I found it very difficult to get used to. I think.
Yeah.
Um, I it was only. mm, I think I only realized why that the pacing was intentional, right? As
Hmm.
like a young teen kind of watching it in the moments when the slow mo were used, right? Because
Hmm.
it's so exaggerated. I think in particular it was it's the scene where he's sitting in the office like writing and smoking, right?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and all the smoke kind of rises into the ceiling lamp and all of that, and they intentionally kind of like slow that down for effect.
Hmm.
Then I kind of okay, so this is a like specific artistic choice. I may not necessarily be used to it. I'm
Hmm.
gonna give it a shot, right?
Yeah.
But much like the use of musical refrain, it was something that I got used to,
Mm.
instead of something that I immediately enjoyed. Like, this isn't easy viewing
Mm.
necessarily, right? If you are used to this kind of like auteur cinema, right? Sure, right? You're gonna bask in it. You're gonna take your time with it. It's easy to kind of fall in love with a film that's this beautiful, right?
Mm.
But if you're not used to that kind of cinema, then like it's hard to watch.
Mm.
It's slow, it's quiet, it's filled with a
Hmm.
lot of nuances that you have to pay attention to. You can't
Hmm.
be on your phone and be watching this at the same time. You're just gonna miss like tons of things that are going on, right? It's something that requires you to be immersed in it,
Hmm.
with a lot of intention.
It's very art house, lah. One
Mm.
one of my first few art house film experiences, I
Same here,
think.
same here.
Yeah, the pacing has kind of this weird like snapshot to it. It's almost like a series of vignettes, not so
Mm.
much a cohesive story. And then like those moments when you're not sure what is happening. Like, are they really falling in love? Oh no, they're play acting.
Yeah,
Like those all even back then they threw me for a loop lah, and it showed me like oh, this is something a bit different, something very
yeah.
special.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The play acting moments definitely caught me off guard. It had me very confused the first time around that I was seeing it. I think in
Hmm.
particular when they're role playing the part where she's supposed to confront her husband. I was just,
Mm.
what the hell is going on, right? And then the camera cuts to the
Yep.
opposite angle. I was like, oh right, okay, why are they doing this?
Yeah.
Um, you know. Also, I completely forgot that Singapore was kind of involved in the story.
very briefly, right? I think in the climax, right? As well as Cambodia, right?
Yeah. So the yeah, I guess we would call that the climax, right? Like of another kind of like misconnections thing that they
Yes,
had,
yeah.
supposedly taking place in Singapore. I don't know if they actually filmed here.
Probably not like it's just a room in Hong Kong.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and of course, everything at the Angkor Wat and the whole resolution of the story there.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I've always found it strange because the story that he brings up right while he's having noodles with Ping
Mm.
is that you speak into a tree, right? You shout into a tree, but he
Yes.
decides to speak into a hole at the Angkor Wat, which
Yep.
always struck me as like very strange.
Yeah.
The significance of that and why exactly he chose to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a romantic soul. I'm guessing that any
Mm.
poetry wasn't enough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He had to go to this historical, ancient landmark, and shout into that his, unrequited love.
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably one of the best films of unrequited love I've seen in a while.
Mm.
I think thematically a bit similar to Casablanca also, because that whole film was about unrequited love.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, like, there was consummation, as far as we know, for
At first lah,
Casablanca.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. These two never consummated, or
yeah.
even got together. They pretended, they suggested to each other, but never
Yeah.
really happened lah. Yeah.
It was it was kind of interesting for me, especially this most recent rewatch. Kind of realized like how much this reminded me of Age of Innocence. Not
Oh.
necessarily the movie itself. Like, I was thinking more of the actual novel.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are a lot of like these moments, like kind of these misconnection moments between. I can't remember the names of the characters, but there's this one
Mm.
particular scene where she's standing at the fireplace, and then he decides, in his goodbye, he doesn't say anything but only kisses the tip of her scarf, right, that's hanging
Mm.
by her back.
Mm.
And I, for some reason, that kind of came to mind, I think, in that particular moment when he finds the cigarette butt in his
Mm-hmm.
room, right, in his ashtray, or with lipstick on it. And I was just like, huh, okay,
Yeah.
that's actually not too far. Like, thematically, Age of Innocence and In the Mood for Love, not something that I occurred to me before.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, I see that also. If you guys want to watch In the Mood for Love, right, it is available on the Criterion Collection,
Hmm.
which has a lot of amazing films.
Yeah.
It's available for purchase everywhere.
Hmm.
Amazon VOD. If you wanna stream it, I'm sure it's available on Amazon. Yep. It's not available on Netflix, right? As far as I know.
Ooh, I don't think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've. Is it
Not
not?
that Netflix Singapore at least lah. Maybe it's available in Netflix US if you VPN it, but I'm not sure lah. But I own the DVD, so there you go. You can download it on
Yeah,
Amazon
I
Store.
own the VCD, but unfortunately, I didn't. I can't watch the VCD.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, well, yeah. I mean, it's very easy to find. It's definitely kind of like a classic.
Mm,
Highly recommend. If you are not familiar with Wong Kar Wai's work,
hmm
it's a good place to start. Actually.
Yeah. A great, very quiet, visual, nuanced take on adultery and love and infatuation, and this kind of idea of the transient reality of relationships.
Hmm.
How a lot of it can linger in the minds of subjects, of the people affected, rather
Yeah.
than how long it lasts in actual time, like. Yeah, it's one of the most perfect Wong Kar Wai movies I've ever seen.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely highly recommended. And next up, we'll be talking about Ang Lee's wuxia epic, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which
Hmm.
also coincidentally came out in the same year as In the Mood for Love, back in 2000. Kind of a monumental year for Chinese cinema. So
Mm.
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was a bit of a groundbreaking event in American cinema, certainly for Western audiences, and maybe for my young self,
Yeah.
because at that point in time, most people who grew up in movies from the West, which, let's face it, a lot of us did, were not familiar with wuxia style filmmaking.
Hmm.
And Ang Lee brought that to the mainstream, not just to popularize it in the Western audiences. It even won awards at the Oscars,
Yeah.
for its stunt work, for its acting, for its writing. Such a stellar achievement
Hmm.
by Ang Lee. You picked Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon as one of your favorite Chinese films of all time. Tell us why.
Um, I mean, there were a couple of films that I wanted to kind of pick out, right? And like wuxia is a big part of Chinese cinema.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, amongst all the kind of modern wuxia films, which we'll probably touch on a bit later on,
Mm-hmm.
uh, is, holds kind of special place, right? Where I think it's the first time that it is wuxia, but mixed with art house cinema,
Mm.
essentially, right? And it not only did it kind of like reinvent or kind of like expand upon what notions of wuxia were,
Yeah.
but the fact that it was shot specifically for, I mean, not shot specifically for, but with Western audiences in mind, right? Like they wanted to kind of introduce the epic sagas of wuxia to a Western audience, and for it to come from Ang Lee of all people, because up till
Mm.
that point he hadn't really explored that particular slice of genre
Not at
for
all. He's done
cinema.
very, very interior art house dramas, a period piece like Sense and Sensibility,
Mm,
Eat, Drink, Men, Women. So they're all very different types of cinema, like more award beatty, shall we say?
yeah, yeah,
And he added that flavor into an action genre as classical as wuxia, which is
yeah.
incredible.
Well, I mean, all of the award Beatty stuff. Like, I think it got 9 nominations, if I'm not wrong. Um,
Mm.
we just lost connection to the server.
Oh shit.
You see
Are
that?
we still recording though?
I don't know. Okay, I
Ah, fuck it.
reconnected. Yeah.
I don't know how that worked though.
I'm guessing our local one still has that.
Okay.
Yeah. So I we can continue, I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
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 So the reason why I picked it, essentially, was because like I just felt like it was a very important film, and upon rewatching it recently, I was just like, kind of blown away about how well it's aged. Like it's still a
Mm.
great, kind of like epic story. Thematically like very progressive for its time, right? Essentially trying to
Mhm.
break free from the societal expectations and kind of pursuing your own path embedded within a wuxia film itself. We've got like a young Michelle Yeoh. We've got a young Chow Yun Fat. Zhang
Zhang
Ziyi's
Ziyi as well. Yeah.
probably her breakout role. In fact, I think this is where the cinema industry really kind of, the film industry really kind of like started to notice her as a character, and then of course she goes on to do Memoirs of Geisha
Mm.
and so on and so forth, which really kind of cemented her as a list actress, right? Like international actress instead of just like known in Chinese circles itself.
Yeah.
So like a very important, monumental, groundbreaking film, but all around like just like a very well done film. Like it's beautifully shot. All the music is great. Like it's got a very distinct um a Chinese influence to it.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently recorded with the Shanghai Symphony Orchestra. And yeah, it's just a very very good representation of of cinema that is reinvented itself to a wider
Mm-hmm.
audience. And for me, like it was just one of those things that when it came out in 2000, I remember going to watch it specifically, and it might have been like the first time in my young life at that point in time where I went to the cinema by myself to catch a wuxia film.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah.
And how did you? Oh, that was by yourself, right?
Yeah, by myself.
Okay. So I went to watch it with some friends. Back in I would say secondary school, early sec.
Hmm.
A lot of my friends may be unfamiliar with that style of film.
Yeah.
For the first scene, when they were flying across the rooftops, how graceful that was and all of that. But
Yeah.
it was so bizarre, right? No explanation for their powers or whatnot. That they literally broke out laughing for the first scene.
Yeah.
And then the film won them over.
Yeah.
And that was so surprising to see, like, my cynical, as I mentioned in my previous episodes, right? I brought them to watch things like Being John Malkovich and things like that.
Yeah.
Never won them over. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon eventually won them over because it is, despite its kind of weird stylistic flourishes, that is wuxia.
Hmm.
In its underpinning, it's a very understandable story that is timeless,
Hmm.
classical, that everyone can love and know. Um, Part of the thing that struck me about Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon wasn't so much the wire work, wasn't so much the stunt work, but was the depth and poignance of the drama and interplay between the characters.
Yeah.
I felt so much for the lead protagonist, Chow Yun Fat and Michelle Yeoh, but I also felt for the quote unquote villain of the story, like Zhang
Mm.
Ziyi, and as well as the, I forgot her name, like Jade, right?
Jade Fox, yeah.
Jade Fox, yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So that was like the main villain of the story, but the real villain of the story is societal patriarchy.
Mm.
So that was really great. Very very progressive themes for its time. Very
Yep.
a very feminist themes. Um, Also, I mean, not to overlook the wire work and the stunt work, because I had
Oh
never
yeah.
seen anything so graceful, so beautiful, and so spiritual.
Yeah.
Fighting in a Western sense. When you watch stuff like John Wick, or back in the 90s, the Michael Bay stuff.
Yeah.
Um, it's based on one character having a beef, having a struggle with another character. A lot of it is based on violence, a lot of it is based on conflict.
Yeah.
But in the best martial arts films, and including wuxia films, and including this one, the characters are not so much fighting each other,
Mm.
but rather celebrating their powers, celebrating their excellence, testing each other's limits. Trying to transcend space, gravity, the limitations of the mind,
Mm-hmm.
the fears of the mind, and the limitations of the body. In a way that it's just so spiritual. Like there's no like real malice to it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I mean,
Yeah,
like you've talked about before, right? Like, there's no real villain in this film,
yeah.
and the fact is that, well, first of all, like, just the aesthetically, right? Like, when wuxia films do action, right,
Mm,
you get to see all of it, right? There's no shaky
mm,
camera to kind of hide that. There's no, like, super up close, and kind of like you get lost in the flurry that a lot of like Hollywood action movies like to do today, or have liked to do for the last like decade or so, right?
mhm.
You get to see everything. And like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, I think like 80 or 90% of the stunt work and the fight sequences were done by the
Practical.
actors. Were not just practical effects, but they were done by the actors themselves,
Yeah,
right?
just straight up old school wire work from the 70s.
Yeah, and so like
Yeah.
when we see them kind of like fighting in the bamboo forest and all of that, like that's really them like putting in the work, and putting themselves at risk.
Mhm.
But more than that, like, just to touch on that same point, right? Like, so much of the time when we have fight scenes in Western cinema, right? Like, it's a lot of time it's about the violence of it, right?
Yeah.
But in this particular case, it's a beautiful thing when the fight scenes and the accompanying dialogue with those fight scenes are about resolving conflict within yourself, right? As well as,
Philosophical, right?
yeah, it's a philosophical, moral kind of like quandary where you are trying to surpass yourself, and in
Mm.
that moment, while you're trying to surpass yourself, you're also trying to. It's embodied with the conflict with another person who's also trying to surpass themselves, right? Um, and on top of that, you also have this very different use of what a MacGuffin is. So in Crouching Tiger,
Mm.
Hidden Dragon, the MacGuffin is this sword, right, called Green Destiny,
Yeah.
which is it is, for all intents and purposes, a MacGuffin. Like, throughout the entire thing, everybody's trying to obtain it, but the symbolism behind that whole idea of like a green destiny, a verdant destiny, a destiny that is fresh and about to bloom,
Yeah.
is very much very much underpins the journey of Zhang Ziyi's character,
Mhm.
specifically. And she's the only one within the story, right? Despite the fact that three out of the four main cast members are kind of looking for that manages to secure that, right, at the end of the day.
Mhm.
And it's something that's very rare to see in mainstream cinema, right? A lot of the time we get like MacGuffins, you chase things all over the universe, but like it doesn't underpin the same kind of like heavy symbolism
Mm.
that we got in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Yeah, a MacGuffin isn't just a MacGuffin most times lah.
Yeah.
When a MacGuffin is often used derogatorily when
Mm.
you talk about a story, right? But not all things are bad inherently. A MacGuffin can be used well. That's why MacGuffins exist. That's why cliches exist, right?
Yeah.
Like early on, like it's used to underpin thematic symbolism, which is what Crouching Tiger does. It's not like, say, Rise of Skywalker, where you're trying to find this thing that leads you to this other thing that leads you to that other thing, and then you lose that thing, and then in the end, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's a stupid MacGuffin.
Hmm.
Like this is a good MacGuffin. Um, if you aren't aware, let me just break down the story for a little bit. It involves main character Cho Yun Fat, who
Mm.
plays Li Mu Bai. As I mentioned, he is a warrior who has vowed to avenge the death of his master. Classical. He has for many years been in love with Yu Shu Lian, played by Michelle Yeoh,
Mm-hmm.
and she with him. It's a reciprocal thing. But their personal feelings wait upon vengeance because they attempt to recapture the sword we mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
the green destiny that once belonged to Li Mubai's master and has recently been sold to a wealthy district governor. So this brings Yu Shulian into contact with the governor's sheltered daughter Jen Yu, played by Zhang Ziyi,
Mm-hmm.
who is at first seemingly very princessy, very
Yeah.
spoiled, cannot do things for herself. Yeah, he has assistants and servants everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
but she's not who we think she is. She's not who society thinks she is, and she's certainly not who her father and mother think she is.
Yeah.
And that's really great. The other main character, Jade Fox, played by Cheng Pepe, stands between the heroes and their dreams, and is essentially the bad influence
Mm-hmm.
for Zhang Ziyi's character, despite the fact that she herself has a tragic backstory.
Yeah.
Um, what a fantastic classical story that is that has added further depth and poignance through Ang Lee's skill as an interior dramatist,
Mm.
skills that he has honed on Sense and Sensibility and Eat, Drink, Man, Woman, those types of films.
Yeah.
When you have that kind of dramatic depth and poignance added onto the graceful, beautiful spiritual wire work and fighting of wuxia, it creates this almost improved, updated version of wuxia,
Mm-hmm.
and it almost makes me wish that maybe the genre had carried on in this fashion,
Yeah.
rather than devolve once again to the kind of simplistic good versus bad type of story that you find in let's say Disney's live action Mulan.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, it's very obvious that Mulan, for example, right? Like, it wants very much to to be in that particular spirit, right? Where you have, a wuxia of epic proportions with
Mm,
gorgeous visuals, and a very solid kind of like personal storyline with a moral to it.
mm-hmm,
Um, the problem I feel like is that the form is there but the spirit is not, right? Like the
mm,
it and some it makes me wonder if it's because it's not Hollywood's story to tell.
mm.
So I'm very excited for the new Mulan that's coming out. It looks amazing.
Yeah, the one that China is producing. Yeah.
Yeah, and like it's kind of one of those things, right? Like the reaction to Hollywood's 1998 Godzilla, for example, right? And the Godzilla that we kind of got after that.
Mm-hmm.
Um which was Shin Godzilla, which is its own like great piece of film.
Mm.
So we'll see where that goes. But nonetheless, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon did not spin off, but like it did uh
Inspire.
inspire a number of great wuxia films of in the same kind of like tone and
Vain, like,
texture of that. Yeah,
yeah.
so you've got like House of Flying Daggers, and you've got like
Yeah.
Hero, you've got like Curse of a Golden Flower, and I mean Zhang Yimou's. I think Curse of the Golden Flower was the point in which where it kind of departed from that, right? Like, kind of shedding the whole idea, like, okay, look, we want to keep the art house look of it. It's going to be beautiful, but we want like it to be epic. It doesn't necessarily need to have the kind of drama that um House of Flying Daggers or Hero had
Mm-hmm.
necessarily, And then so like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, among all the wuxia that I was thinking about talking for us to kind of like watch and talk about, has a special place, right? Just because it's a unique combination of things that
Yeah.
would have spun a legacy of like art house wuxia,
Mm-hmm.
but it kind of like took a very different turn, right? A couple of iterations of that genre
Mm-hmm.
later, which is
Yeah.
a bit sad, And I don't think we've had anything even remotely close
No, man.
to
Could you
that.
imagine this alternate universe? Like we exist currently in this universe where there is this thing suddenly that's popped up because of A24 called art house horror,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Can you imagine like there's this like because of Crouching Tiger, there's this slew of art house wuxia that came out in the early 2000s. I would have been so happy, but
yeah,
that didn't happen sadly.
yeah. That didn't happen. I mean, like we got a very I think at the point in time when Zhang Yun was getting really big, right, with the stuff that he was doing,
Mm,
it kind of split off into two very different. camps, right? Like we got a whole slew of martial artist stuff, not necessarily wuxia per se, right?
No,
So we
but
got like Ip
in the
Man.
tradition of martial arts, yeah,
Yeah,
Ip
yeah.
Man, yep.
So Ip Man is a good it's a good kind of like example of that. And then we had the Masters, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um which of course like that's like art house to the nth degree.
Yeah.
But not really wuxia as we traditionally understand it, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So that just kind of even cements Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon as a very unique piece of film,
Mm-hmm.
in film history, and part of the reason why I chose it, right? Not just for it being groundbreaking, it being seminal and monumental, and that, and kind of like affecting the history of cinema, although not necessarily in the way that you and I would necessarily want
Mm-hmm.
that to go, but still important nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of credit has to go to the actors themselves, because not
Mm,
many actors can perform the physical stunt work that is required here,
yeah.
and look, great doing it while
Mm.
delivering really emotive pieces of dialogue, anime style in the middle of it. Chow Yun Fat and Michelle Yeoh were great martial arts stars, and they've spun off again, after this to become
Hmm.
even bigger martial arts stars.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, this was Zhang Ziyi's breakout role. It launched the careers of many people. But one person in particular has to be given credit is Yuen Wu Ping,
Yeah.
who is the choreographer of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, who also made it big just the previous year. He's done many other things, but he
Yeah.
made it really big by choreographing The Matrix.
Yeah.
Which brings me to my point. I think two particular movies opened up Western palettes
Hmm.
to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Number one was The Matrix, which tonally and thematically dissimilar to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. But
Hmm.
there were certain elements of the fights, how poetic it was, how stylized it was, how graceful it was. Admittedly explained through, the VR thing of it. That allowed you to maybe like, hey, okay, like this type of fight scenes are cool too. It's
Yeah.
very different from the gritty, grounded fights that we usually have.
Hmm.
And number two, story wise, I think Mulan opened up this whole feminist heroine fighting against like patriarchy
Yeah.
in Chinese society
Hmm.
stories that suddenly blossomed,
Hmm.
culminating in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, a post cartoon Mulan.
Yeah. Yeah. Post cartoon Mulan. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, like, if you think about it, um, okay, so the whole title itself, right? Right. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. There are multiple layers of meaning to it, but the
Mm-hmm.
easiest one to kind of understand that no matter where you go, there are hidden masters, right? Hidden in plain sight.
Yeah.
And in this particular case, the hidden masters, yeah, the two main women of the story, right?
Mm.
Who, for all intents and purposes, are unseen by society. At the end of the day, they're only recognized by the immediate people whose lives they've impacted, right?
Yep.
And recognized by other masters only later on when they're discovered. But
Mm.
they in no way have the same kind of recognition or the
Mm.
same kind of respect that someone like Li Mu Bai carries, right?
Mm.
Simply because they're women. And of course you have this distinct um a distinct path, right, between the way that Michelle Yeoh's character has decided, like, for all intents and purposes, she's a self-made woman, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, she owns her own private security company. She's a martial artist in her own right. She's traversed the Jianghu, and she's developed her skills and all of that. But at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the day, her dream and her choice is to fall into that traditional societal role and hopefully
Mm-hmm.
marry Mubai, right?
Mm.
Whereas Zhang Zi, on the other hand, is going in the completely opposite direction, whereby, because of her circumstances, she's forced into marriage as a political tool.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition to that, has talent that um, nobody wanted to develop, or nobody even knew that she had, except for Jade Fox, right?
Yeah. Whose
Who
own backstory mirrors like what you were saying. Like
Yeah,
all she wanted to do was learn Mubai's form of martial arts.
yeah,
She wasn't allowed into the school. No girls allowed. It said on the front.
yeah,
And that's why she turned bad. If
yeah.
only they had been more inclusive, right?
Yeah, exactly, right? So,
Yeah.
like, it's a very interesting kind of like in 2000, right? Like,
Mm.
for something like that to come out of Chinese cinema.
Yeah.
Not that we have not like had, not that there's any lack of Chinese heroines in Chinese literature or in Chinese cinema for that matter, right?
Yeah.
For them to put that out there and for that
Hmm.
to reach Western shores is really
Yeah.
quite something.
Yeah, for a movie about societal repression, about characters resolutely sacrificing their own happiness and their own romantic love, to fulfill a set of societal expectations that maybe they don't want for themselves.
Yeah.
It's kind of similar to the next movie we're talking about, about the whole modernity versus tradition kind of
Hmm.
vibe.
Hmm.
Do you rebel against it? How do you improve upon tradition? Should you improve upon tradition?
Yeah.
Those kinds of questions are really unusual for a movie
Hmm.
of this ilk. Um, love also the romance between Chow Yun Fat and Michelle
Oh
Yeoh.
man,
Uh,
heartbreaking.
Such a understated, unrequited love. Very well done. A bit similar to In the Mood for Love as well.
Yeah.
If they had swords. Yeah, this movie like really finds a lot of like this kind of fluid expressiveness and a sense of florid and formal beauty
Hmm.
in both the dramatic scenes and in both the fight scenes.
Yeah.
The fight scenes, without a doubt, what the fight scenes reminded me of, right? I was a big musicals fan at this time.
Mm.
um
Okay. Okay.
this these fight scenes represent, or at least express emotion and story
Hmm.
and theme in the way that song and dance numbers do in musicals.
Yeah.
Like to me, these fight scenes are more song and dance numbers than they are traditional Western style fight scenes lah.
Hmm.
And they're so ambitious and intricate and beautiful that it really blew my mind. Even going back to the old wuxia, I guess perhaps they didn't have the technology at the time,
Yeah.
or stuff like that. This is definitely the best looking wuxia out there lah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, I think at that point in time, there was a couple of like advancements in terms of like cinema technology, right? That was
Hmm.
allowed them to do things that weren't there before, and of
Yeah.
course, but surprisingly, 17 million was how much they spent on the movie itself, right?
Yep.
And it did very very well at the box office.
Hmm.
Upon opening. But even then, right, well shot, well choreographed. It does not have the same scale of epicness as some of the modern wuxia that followed it had, with like the giant kind of like cast of thousands of extras and things like that.
Yeah.
But still, like for the story and for what it was trying to say and trying to tell,
Mhm.
right? So well done.
It sacrifices the epic scale of war that you
Mm,
frequently see in wuxia films
yeah.
to add in Ang Lee's Jane Austen-ish flavor of interior drama.
Yeah.
So I would much rather sacrifice scale in favor of um character intimacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would much rather have character intimacy than that lah.
For sure, for sure. And
Yeah.
I think like we get like tons of it, right? Like, and that's something that's a bit lacking in say Hero or in Curse of the Golden Flower.
Hmm.
Um, you do get some of that in House of Flying Daggers, um, since it's a romance masquerading as a wuxia.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like it's. I mean, again, it's just a unique piece of film history, right?
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
terms of what the proposition that it made to its audiences at its time, and even like, what 20 years later, we're still wowed by um, the craft of it, the art of it.
Yeah, dude, it looks better than a 2020 movie, like
Yeah,
Mulan, right? Yeah.
yeah.
Um, Lee, I think he wasn't just trying to mimic or ape old genre. He
Mm,
was trying to show new audiences how effective this type of story can be
mhm,
if you devote the proper budget and the level of craft to it.
yeah.
Like this type of storytelling is not outdated by any means. It
Hmm.
still can be done.
Yeah.
It's just that people since Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon haven't done it this well. But that doesn't mean that the genre is outdated.
Yeah.
The genre is fit for a reboot, and I hope one comes soon lah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, fingers crossed. The new Chinese Mulan that's coming out. I hate having to say that, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it hits the same kind of highs for that, right? Like that, I feel like there's a lot of pride at stake,
Mm-hmm.
for that, and I'm not sure if we'll get the same kind of interior drama. I mean, obviously, Ang Lee is not on the project,
Mm.
uh, but hopefully we get something closer to that than we got
Yeah,
with the Disney one.
I mean, I'm not saying that Ang Lee is the perfect filmmaker, but he was the perfect filmmaker for this.
Hmm.
There were instances in his career where he tries to inject that kind of interior drama into other things that didn't work out. I'm talking about the Hulk. If you guys
Yeah,
remember this,
yeah.
it was just this like 3 hour Shakespearean exercise, and the Hulk shows up for like 2 minutes in the movie. It was bizarre lah, but okay lah. That
it's
one misstep lah.
it's still considered canon, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
Ang Lee's Hulk is considered canon to the MCU.
correct. Ang Lee's Hulk became Edward Norton Hulk, became Mark Ruffalo Hulk.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, that's kind of crazy. I mean, like we don't with everything that all the other projects that he's done, right? Like this is the only wuxia one that he's done, and
Yeah.
of course after Hulk, thankfully he came back with Brokeback Mountain, which is like we discussed the last episode, one of the great romance movies.
Tragedies. Yeah.
Yeah.
Last Caution as well.
Last Caution, also like incredible film, extremely difficult to watch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, great stuff from him. I don't know if he will ever go back to that. I think like how he had an idea in his mind with
Mm-hmm.
Crouching Tiger, and he executed it to his satisfaction, and he's kind of done with that. He just wanted to prove a point, and I think he
Mm-hmm.
proved it very well.
He did. It's a glorious movie that is both unabashedly escapist,
Mm-hmm.
but also shockingly thematically relevant
Yeah.
and surprisingly touching all at the same time. It
Mm.
has it has the dramatic heft of an Oscar drama, which it did because it was nominated for Best Picture
Yeah.
in the dramatic category. And it also has the style and the flair and the grace of all the old classic wuxias.
Yeah.
Perfect blend of tradition and Western dramatic influences.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the last great wuxia movie that we've seen. Hopefully, we'll have more to come.
Yeah.
Next up, speaking of art house films, this was, of course, an art house film. It didn't pretend to be otherwise. I'm going to be talking about Lulu Wang's beautiful and bittersweet bicultural tale of family, tradition, and mortality, based on a true lie slash true story. This thing really happened to Lulu Wang. So it stars actor slash rapper Aquafina as Billy, a young Chinese American woman who is distraught to find out that her beloved grandmother, played by Zhao Suzhen,
Mm-hmm.
has been diagnosed with terminal cancer. So, in keeping with traditional Chinese beliefs over in China, the family chooses not to tell Nai Nai. It's a Mandarin term for grandma, an
Yeah.
affectionate term. So they choose not to tell Nai Nai that she only has months to live. So they want to spare her the emotional burden. It's a decision that Billy vehemently disagrees with. So instead, the family arranges a wedding for Billy's cousin as a pretext for every one of their family to return home to Changchun, China, to visit Nai Nai for one last
Mm-hmm.
time. Bizarre, a fake wedding, or fake slash real wedding, so that they can say goodbye to a grandma who doesn't know she's dying.
Mm-hmm.
So, in lesser hands, a story like this, I felt could have been an overwrought drama full of sappy sentimentality, very cry festy.
Yeah.
Or it could have been a zany comedy. Oh, let's not tell grandma how close will grandma find out, that kind of thing. They will focus on cultural differences and they make fun of that kind of stuff. Thankfully, it's not. The farewell is subtle, it is sensitive, it's sharply observed, it is buoyed by organic humor and tons of empathy that enlightens us to both sides of the conflict
Mm-hmm.
without being didactic about which side is right. The farewell mines kind of this universal resonance from a culturally specific deception, because it is so grounded in truth. Ironically, it's tagline based on an actual lie.
Yeah.
The reason this film feels so deeply personal and authentic is because of its autobiographical nature. If you want to find out the real story behind this,
Mm-hmm.
I urge you to go look up the 2016 story that Lulu Wang did for NPR on their show This American Life.
Mm-hmm.
It details the real life story of this. Like, it was really her grandma who fell sick, had cancer. It was really her family who told her not to tell them. So this was kind of a loose adaptation of what happened to her in real life.
Yeah.
Beautiful. The beauty of Farewell is that it's not a movie about how Billy slash Lulu Wang
Yeah.
is right and the old ways are wrong. It is beautiful because you can see both sides of it, and it's a loving sketch of a family that carefully depicts each relative's thinking,
Mm-hmm.
so you understand where everyone is coming from. Like,
Yeah.
a lie is a lie, but this is a good lie and a well-meaning one, a
Mm,
well-meaningful one, lah. Yeah,
yeah, for sure. I mean, like, I'm so impressed with Aquafina.
yeah,
In kind of like her first dramatic role. As far as I know, right? Like,
mm,
I honestly, okay, when you told me when I checked it out and I saw Aquafina was like, I was like, okay, this is like it's gonna be like a straight up kind of zany comedy thing, right?
mm,
But like so much depth from her, so much great breadth of expression and nuances.
yep,
Something that her face is so expressive, and it's something that they make fun of in the movie itself, right? Her mother
mm-hmm,
constantly chides her for not being able to hide her emotions, but so much of those facial expressions carry the quiet moments of the movie.
yeah,
You can see a lot of like interior drama going on while she's listening to her relatives explain their point of view and where they're coming from and the stance that they're taking.
mm-hmm,
And it's incredible how balanced it is, right? Like, it's so easy, I think, not having not watched the movie yet, to think, yeah, of course, like Billy's right, you need to tell that.
yeah,
But to hear such reasonable arguments from both
mm-hmm,
sides, in a very fair and balanced way, right? And really adds to the movie does the work.
mm,
It really makes sure that you understand that it's not as simple as, like, it's a Eastern or Western or a cultural kind of opinion whether or not something of this importance should be kept a secret, right?
mm-hmm,
Like, there's a lot more of it than that, and I think
mm-hmm,
the movie does a very, very good job of laying all that out for the audience.
yeah.
um and that just makes the way that the movie plays out feel very well earned and very satisfying.
Yeah, it really made me think, like I know this is not sci-fi lah. Like Star Trek always made me think about how morality is shaped,
Hmm.
how culture and societal norms shape morality, and how morality can be different
Yeah.
depending on the cultural norms of wherever you visit. So this made me think, because like, Billy's uncle sort of says, the difference between East and West is that in the East, a person's life is part of a whole. So the secret isn't some sort of cruel evasion.
Yeah.
It's the secret is like a hardship to be lifted from Nai Nai and to be burdened by the rest of the family. So it allows Nai Nai a happy and unworried end to her life.
Yeah.
So it brilliantly uses traditions to ponder how our sense of duty is shaped.
Hmm.
Aquafina's characters, Billy's family, their sense of duty is different
Hmm.
because they were raised differently, and her sense of duty is different. So it talks a lot about morality and mortality, but also an endearing and mischievously funny dramedy. Built on layered family dynamics. It,
Yeah.
it ranges from the very relatable, awkward reunions. I'm sure many of you out there during the reunion dinners must have had some of that.
Yeah.
Some passive aggressive dinner table
Oh
conversations.
my god.
Otherwise, some moments are emotionally potent.
Yeah.
Others are hilarious in their absurdity. But more than anything, I think it's the film's depiction of caring and affection that feels so winning.
Mm.
Simultaneously, we also kind of little bit explore, not overdone, but
Yeah.
the themes are there. Like we explore Billy's anxiety as an immigrant, a second generation immigrant
Yeah.
visiting her birth country.
Hmm.
It's quietly affecting and beautifully understated to show the delineation of the Chinese diaspora.
Mm.
There is an entire generation out there that didn't grow up in China,
Yeah.
but think of themselves still as Chinese. And as you mentioned, Aquafina is great. She has this reputation as this firecracker comic relief, and she's
Yeah.
the exact opposite of that. And amazingly, you know who the firecracker comic relief is? It's the grandma. Zhao Zixin portrayal as Nai Nai is so warm and wonderful and high
Mm.
key
Yeah.
and energetic. She is what Aquafina usually does. She has this beaming smile and sunny disposition that is so absolutely infectious, and her rapport with Aquafina is magical. You
Yeah.
instantly believe that they are related, and it's instantly invests you in the cross generational love and relationship they have for one another.
Hmm.
Certainly one of the most beautiful and bittersweet things I've ever seen. I loved Nai Nai. I didn't want her to die either.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, oh man, like, I think anyone who watches this, right, is gonna see a part of their grandma and Nine Nine, and that's kind of the beauty of it,
Mm,
and like, um being Chinese and having gone through like similar social interactions with my own relatives, for example,
Mm-hmm.
really kind of makes this very bittersweet and very nostalgic, right? Like you
Yeah.
feel immediately for Billy's struggle, and you feel invested in the Nai's story, right? Whether or not she finds out, um, almost immediately, I feel conflicted, right? On the one hand, yeah, okay, I understand where Billy's coming from,
Mm-hmm.
right? I am more inclined to that, but at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, when you see Nai's interaction with her family in her daily life, with the grandkids and so on and so forth,
Mm-hmm.
like you start to wonder to yourself, like maybe it's not as clear cut, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's a lot better for her to continue living like she's been living, and when it's her time, it's her time.
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, so like powerful stuff. It was definitely a movie that took me by surprise for multiple reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, like watching this so close to Chinese New Year was also just like, oh wow,
Yeah.
that's
I
that's that's
mean,
a lot.
this Lulu Wang is not some sort of experienced filmmaker. This I think her first or second film. And she has crafted a beautiful one. Not
Yeah.
just story wise, not just in terms of her direction of her actors,
Hmm.
but in terms of the gorgeously composed shots. You feel like this roiling emotional unease. Amidst like China's neon landscape, right? That
Hmm.
she and a lot of hilarious sequences that use background humor. Uh, perfectly. Very, very sophisticated moments of background humor that you kind
Yeah.
of see in like things like Arrested Development and stuff like that. But then you mix it in with very, very somber drama, with sophisticated emotional symbolism.
Hmm.
There's a lot of metaphor in this film. Like so, her camera work is just as assured as her writing work.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is a story about dichotomies, right, and
Yeah.
how you reconcile them. It is about celebration and sorrow. It is about individuality versus family, grief versus love, past versus present, truth versus lies. And the farewell reconciles so many of those dichotomies with exquisite poise,
Hmm.
because in the end it's an affecting film that examines the roles of tradition and culture in our lives without making any moral judgments about what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The fellow reminded me so much of Joy Luck Club.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and like it
The
I
the
mean,
family scenes lah.
the family scenes, especially the ones around the dinner table in particular,
Yeah.
and of course Joy Luck Club is also about American women relating to their immigrant mothers, as
Mm.
well. But like it felt like a very different story, of course, but like a very modern take on what the Joy Luck Club was for its time. Yeah.
Definitely, man. Yeah. Highly enjoyed this film. It's available via A24. You can rent it, you can buy it. It's out on, Amazon and
Hmm.
stuff like that. Oh, I have the DVD. I purchased it. I liked it so much.
Yeah.
You can too. All of these films actually right now are just available on DVD. They're available on Amazon, available to purchase,
Hmm.
all available to rent if you want. Highly recommend all of them.
Yeah.
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, In the Mood for Love, The Farewell are great examples of Chinese language cinema,
Yeah.
and there are a lot more as well. Like there are plenty of films that we have not mentioned at all.
Yeah.
For honorable mentions, I just want to quickly shout out, movies like Infernal Affairs, one of the
Oh.
greatest crime thrillers of all time. When you talk about the whole undercover genre, within a triad or within a gang,
Hmm.
Infernal Affairs is right up there. I'm one of the few that likes both The Departed, Martin Scorsese's adaptation, and Infernal Affairs. I think The Departed is a good film that
Yeah.
deserves its Oscar nominations.
Yes.
That is just to give you a basis of comparison, because The Infernal Affairs is so much better
Oh
than
yeah,
The
for
Departed.
sure.
The Departed is good. Infernal Affairs is great.
Uh,
Also would like to shout out, other things like Kung Fu Hustle, which we share a love for.
mhm.
Actually briefly wanted to uh we were toying with the idea of making it a main topic lah, but
Yeah.
perhaps we'll talk at length about it next year. But Kung Fu Hustle is an amazing Chinese film too.
Yeah, definitely, definitely, and of course, honorable mentions to all the other wuxia films that I think we've already mentioned: House of Flying
Mm,
Daggers, Hero, Curse of the Golden Flower, all
mm,
very very good modern wuxia stuff, but none of them really quite reach the heights of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which is why we kind of settled on that.
mm-hmm.
Um, oh, shout out to any Stephen Chow movie, which I spent a lot of my childhood Chinese New Year downtime between visiting relatives watching.
Yeah.
A lot of good stuff. I mean, like I really enjoyed like this little trip into Chinese cinema.
Mm-hmm.
Um, haven't been up to date what's coming out out of like a Chinese art house recently. Maybe
Same.
we'll look into that. But
Yeah.
there's like plenty of more topics. I would love to kind of revisit this next year, or whenever, yeah,
Hmm.
Mooncake Festival or something like that gives us
Yeah.
a reason
Yeah.
to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a lot. I have a big list of old Chinese propaganda films, from back in the 50s during
Oh
communist time that
yes.
I really want to get into.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
like one of the films that I wanted to that was on my short list, right, was kind of Raise the Red Lantern, and then there's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Red Light, Green Light as well.
Hmm.
A lot of like Mao era like films, or films about the Mao era, especially, which I loved.
Hmm.
Um, but that didn't quite seem to fit what we were trying to go for this time around in this particular episode. But I would love to explore those as well. It's been a while.
I I agree. Final shout out, if you're a fan of the Wu Tang Clan, go watch the 36th Chamber of the Shaolin. It's a 1978 martial arts movie of which greatly inspired Wu Tang. It inspired their name. It inspired
Hmm.
their first album, Enter the 36 Chambers. Without this film, there would be no Wu Tang.
Yeah.
One of the most iconic martial arts Shaolin style kung fu films ever created. Out of Hong Kong. Yeah, so if you're a Wu-Tang fan and you've never seen this film, what are you doing, and have you not wondered where they got their name from?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like it really, really is. Like I watched the film because my
Yeah,
uncle has a VHS of it.
not because of
Uh,
Wu-Tang.
Not because of Wu Tang, and then of course I discovered Wu Tang later on, and
Mm,
then later on I discovered that this was the film. It was a kind of like a very strange roundabout way to discover the
yeah,
origins of Wu Tang.
yeah.
But yeah, it is. Oh man, like it is like proto wuxia, seriously. Like it really,
Hmm.
really is like the genesis of the genre itself.
Yeah,
But 1972, right? Yeah,
1978. Yeah, it's
yeah,
proto a
1970.
lot of things. It's proto like the Shaolin kung fu genre,
Oh yeah, yeah.
wuxia.
Hmm.
It's kind of it stands at like this grandfather branch nexus where a lot of like the classical Chinese genres come from, especially the martial arts genre.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah, a
It's a
lot
good
of
one.
this film was I wouldn't say parodied, homaged in Kill Bill also.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. So please go check those out. And of
definitely.
course, highly recommend the three movies that we've talked about today.
Of course, we'll be back in a couple of weeks' time for the new episode of Genre Equality. We'll be talking about a lot of stuff. Wonder Vision, Space Sweeper, Saint Maud, a great new art house film out there. Isa will be back with a whole new list of anime recommendations, including Self at Work, including some complaints about The Promised Neverland Season 2, and lots of other stuff. There's a lot of old anime that's coming back this season
Yeah.
that we have never had a chance to talk about because the genre is about only 3 years old. But some of these animes, from what I hear, are like 4 to 5 years old.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. World Trigger is one of them. Log Horizon is
Yeah.
one of them. Like things that I've loved for so long and never thought that they would get new sequels to.
Hmm.
But yeah, I would love to kind of just dive in and kind of recommend those, and then if you're keen on watching them, you've got a couple of seasons to binge before you catch up. So that's always nice.
Definitely, man. Can't wait for that. See you guys next time. Till then, this is Hitzer.
I'm Isa.
Goodbye, guys.
Ciao.